You are watching All Things Real Estate and More with Ann-Riley Caldwell, with a brand new episode on ALTA Statement.
Hey, I'm Ann-Riley Caldwell. I'm a local Nashville, Middle Tennessee Realtor. I'm here today with Anna Rowland from Signature Title. We're talking about all kinds of fun topics about title companies and title insurance. And so one of the big questions, then one of the most important documents that people look at and don't really understand is something called an ALTA statement, correct?
That's correct,
yeah.
yes.
So we go through the whole process. You've run title searches, you've dealt with lenders, you've maybe worked with another title company, you're putting all the documents together for that exciting closing day that we're all trying to get to.
Exactly.
And then right before closing, a couple things have to happen. First, there has to be, if there's a lender involved, a closing disclosure, correct?
Correct.
What we call a final CD.
That's correct.
And that has to be signed at least three business
business
days before
correct.
closing, which that's what holds up a lot of closings, if anybody wants to know. Because when lenders don't get those out, we just sit there and we
just
wait.
have to keep waiting.
That's right. So then from a financial standpoint, you're getting all that information and you're reconciling numbers between the lender and both title companies.
Correct.
And so then we're creating the all important ALTA statement. So tell us a little bit about what that is and why it's important.
Yeah, so the ALTA statement, it stands for American Land Title Association, and they're kind of a regulatory association. But the ALTA is essentially just like a checks and balances. So it's a summary page of all credits and all debits from buyer and seller. So it can be confusing, of course, but you're essentially looking at it like you're looking at your checkbook. You're seeing who's paying what. It'll have your tax prorations, it'll have your closing fees, it'll have any credits or debits or invoices that need to be paid. But everything has to be on that ALTA statement. So when a buyer or seller sees it, they can see exactly what's being paid, who's paying it, where it's going. And it just summarizes all of the numbers.
And this is where, when we're looking at the contract, obviously we have purchase prices in there.
Yes.
We have who's going to pay seller expenses, which often the seller does, and buyer expenses. There are paragraphs in the contract that talk about what the standards are. But then obviously those things can be changed in the contract. So sometimes HOA fees, there's all kinds of fund transfer fees and statement of account fees and things like that. So all of that can ultimately be negotiated, correct?
Correct.
So you guys are referring obviously back to the contract and just double checking who's supposed to be paying what.
Oh yeah.
And that's where we're seeing the debits and the credits.
It's all going to go back to the contract. The contract is our Bible per se as to what we're putting on what, and everything within reason is negotiable. So there's really no standard of who pays what, but it just based on what's noted in the contract. I mean, typically if nothing's written, each party would pay their own.
Right.
But that's not often how it is.
Right.
It's usually specified either way. But yes, it's all based on the contract, and it can be something as small as there is an appliance that we're going to charge for from the seller to the buyer, or there's a propane tank that needs to be prorated, or all kinds of crazy things, but mostly invoices for repairs, closing costs, things like that.
So just for people who don't use the terms every day, when you're looking at that ALTA statement, there's basically two columns for the buyer and two columns for the seller.
Yes.
Debits and credits. So just remind everybody kind of what's the difference between a debit and a credit. So if you're the buyer and you see that on your side, what things are you paying and what things are you being given?
So yes, there are two columns on the buyer side and seller side, but we're just going to talk about the buyer side and make it a little bit easier. But so you would be given credits for things like tax prorations if you're prorating with the seller on that. Earnest money, if you put down some earnest money at the beginning of the contract, you'd be given a credit for that. If the seller's paying any of your closing costs or your title expenses, those would count as a credit to you. And then your debits would be anything like loan fees, origination fees, escrow account setup, closing fees, anything like that, HOA fees, all of those things would be debits to you.
Okay.
The bottom of that statement would reconcile the two, so debits and credits, which would give your bottom line of exactly how much is needed from you at closing.
Got you. Okay, perfect. So now you know how much money you're getting if you're selling something and how much money you're bringing if you're buying something.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, that wraps up our ALTA statement conversation for the day, so we'll be back and talk about some other things.
We hope you enjoyed watching All Things Real Estate and More with Ann-Riley Caldwell. To learn more about Ann Riley, or for your real estate needs, visit notyourordinaryagent.com or call 615-930-0313. Thanks for watching.